Hello everybody, welcome back to the Reiki Den, the outside of the Reiki Den. My name is Jack, I'm the Reiki Witch, this is my channel. I'm really glad to have you all here, and we're going to have a bit of a story time today. So not too long ago, I had done a video on how I got involved in Reiki. And I wanted to do a similar video about tarot, just so that you guys know a little bit about what my background is like. Sorry, I got to take these off. It's really hard to focus. But just to, like I said, give you guys an idea of like where I'm coming from, what my tarot history is, the same as, what my Reiki history is. So when I was introduced to Reiki the first time, I would have been about 11 or 12. My grandmother had a set of cards sitting up on her bookshelf, and she decided that I was allowed to look at them. She just said that, you can tell stories with pictures. And at that point in my life, I was just starting to really focus on writing poetry. So, the idea of being able to tell stories with the cards really, really spoke to me, and I couldn't read a damn thing. I didn't understand any of the pictures. I didn't understand the words in the little white book that came with the deck. I didn't know anything. Like, it was really, really challenging. So then we're going to fast forward a little bit. And we went to the New Age section of a bookstore. Like, my grandmother took me there. It was the first time I had ever even heard or noticed that there was such a thing. And I realized then that not only was there a lot more to the world than I had actually realized, but that my grandmother was totally into all of it. And it was great. This is around the time that I had started getting interested in witchcraft and the history, the witch trials, and Salem specifically, because it's not that far from me. One second. Sorry about that. My granddaughter had come outside here with me, and her mom came out to fetch her. She's not a happy girl. So yeah, like, this whole new world was opened up to me. I'd been studying the witch trials, but I truly believed that witchcraft was real. Like, I really, truly believed that. And, being exposed to tarot cards and to the New Age section of the bookstore and, all of that, it just really triggered something in my mind. And it was kind of from that point on that I will say declared myself a witch. Understanding that it was real, that there's so much more to it than, what anybody had actually ever told me. It was just mind-boggling at that point, So fast forward, multiple years. I was about 20, and I had decided that it was time for me to learn how to read tarot. Now, I knew that that's the deck that my grandmother had let me play with, but I'd never handled any other deck. I didn't know anything about them. I didn't have any background knowledge. I didn't know there was more than one type of deck. I had none of that knowledge. I was running completely blind. I did not have a teacher. I didn't have anybody in my life at that point that could work with me on any of it. It turned out that, 6 months in, here I am teaching my friends as I'm going. So it was definitely, it's something that was a challenge for me right from the beginning. So this one day I decided, we live in this little cottage town, cottage country, central Ontario, about 2 hours north of Toronto, so it's like this really, really small, almost a novelty bookstore. It was almost like it was there just so that they could say that they did have a bookstore in this town. And as much as I was a big reader, I'd never gone in there to buy a book. I don't think I'd actually bought a book at that point in quite a while, to be completely honest. Sorry, it's still pretty bright out here. So I go into the bookstore and immediately find wherever the New Age section was that they had like 2 shelves. No big deal, right? At least there was something there. And I ended up buying 2 books that day. I got Living Wicca by Scott Cunningham, and a book called Magic Made Easy by Patricia Telesco. And now, if you're not familiar with that book, it's basically a book of correspondences, but it includes all these modern things like your computer and your microwave and your toaster and your car and all these different things that you can use that are like things that you'll have on hand, but modern things. And it was a phenomenal book, and I don't know how I managed to lose it along the way, but 20 odd years later, I don't have it anymore, and I wish I did. Patricia, if you happen to be watching, I'd really like to get another copy of that book. Anyways, so I was also able to find a tarot deck, and this was the beginning of my education, really. It was up to me to learn and to do this stuff myself and to teach myself. Because, like I said, I didn't have a teacher or anything, so I was on my own. So there I am at the bookstore, and there's like 2 copies of the same deck on the shelf, and that's it. So I grabbed one and went, paid for my stuff, went home, unwrapped the cellophane twice. Because, you know how tarot decks can be, the box is wrapped, the cards are wrapped separately as well, and, it's a lot of plastic. So I unwrapped the deck, and I'm sitting there and I'm sifting through it, and I'm looking at all the pictures and just trying to get some sense of what's happening, what they might mean, and I'm having a really hard time. So I pulled out the book. Same thing. I didn't understand what the meanings were, and they felt to me like they were all really negative, though. Like every question I asked, every reading I did with that deck just always felt like it was so negative. It was always something bad was about to happen. And so I stopped using it. But before I did that, I did buy a replacement. Okay. So first of all, let me just say that the deck that I initially bought, my very first one, was the typical Rider-Waite. Okay. I hated the deck so bad. Like so much. I couldn't stand it. But I kept trying to use it because that's what I had. And then I moved provinces not too long later or after. And in the process, like first full day in the city, and I needed to go get some paperwork from City Hall. So I walked because it was only 2 blocks away. And I got lost. I'm not even kidding. Like, I'm not even remotely kidding. I totally got lost going 2 blocks. Not my proudest moment, I can honestly say. So, one second. This way. So, excuse me, on my way home again, I had a much better idea of where I needed to go to get home, so I was fine. I'm walking down one of these streets that, it's like the one street between me and City Hall. So anyways, I got, a little ways down the sidewalk, and I could see this, like, A-frame sign. Like, like the ones that are like this, and they usually have, like, a crossbar, or they're just, like, the hinge doesn't move that way. Well, there was one of those on the sidewalk, and all it said was "Walk-ins welcome," and it was black. It had little pink flowers and green vines also, painted on it. And I was really, really curious, right? And I looked at the building that it was in front of, and there was no name on it. It was just a painted black, the same pink flowers and green vines. And I was like super curious. But I figured I'd check it out later, right? Like, I needed to get home. So I walked the next, 20 feet up to the corner, and then got halfway across the road and changed my mind. I was like, no, I'm going to go back. Like, I have to go back, right? I need to see what this place is. And it says walk-ins are welcome, right? So I can obviously go in. So I did. And it was the very first metaphysical shop that I had ever encountered, that I'd ever been in. And I was just, from the moment I stepped in, I was absolutely in love with this place. I could smell the herbs behind the door, the incense that she was selling and burning, the music that she had playing. There was this whole atmosphere that just drew me in, and I just absolutely loved it. And it was, from that moment, it was my favorite place to go. And I went regularly. Got to be friends with the owner. I had actually started making friends with her that first day. And her name was Donna, and she was just the sweetest lady. Like, I just adored her so much. Now, she's not with us anymore. She's crossed over. But, you know, when she was still around, she was like my mentor in a lot of ways. The biggest difference was that she was strictly Wiccan and 100% firmly believed in and ye have none, do what you will. And I am definitely more neutral than that. Like, if someone's, you know, hurting me or hurting my kids, I'm not going to hesitate to, you know, fight back. But it was something like, we had this conversation about the ethics behind binding someone who is being, you know, emotionally abusive, and, you know, or banishing them or something like that. And it ended up causing this rift between us for a while. So it was pretty crazy. But anyways, back on topic. Let's go back on topic. So after, you know, several visits there and separating from my husband at the time, and just, you know, having a lot of stuff going on in my life, things started to settle down after, you know, a couple of months. And I went in the store one day, and like, she'd always had this case right where, you know, she did purchases and stuff. She didn't have a cash register. She just used a cash box and a calculator, which even that seemed like unbelievably cool to me. Like, I can't even explain it. Again, I was young, you know, I'm like 21. So yeah, it was a great place. Like, it really, really was. And this case that she had, I was always drawn to it. So this is where she kept all the tarot cards and the expensive crystals and the expensive jewelry. They were all in this case. And I started paying really close attention. Like, we had this conversation that first day about how I didn't even know that there were, you know, other kinds of decks available that you could use. She always used the Robin Wood, which I adore. Like, I absolutely adore that deck. It's one of my go-tos. I think I've had 3 or 4 copies of it in the last 20 years. So, I think it's 3, but it could be 4. Yeah. 1, 2. No, it's 4. This is my 4th copy. So, actually, that deck is the one that taught me that different decks have different personalities, even if they're a copy of the same deck. So I'll have to tell you guys about that sometime. But after, like I said, after everything was starting to settle down a little bit, I was in, and I really wanted to buy a tarot deck that I could use, that I could read, right? So she let me unwrap one of the decks that I was like fascinated by, and I loved the colors and the images, and it was it's called the Faery Wicca Tarot. Kisma Stepanovich, I think is how you say her name. Stepanek, I think. And I didn't realize at the time that it was actually specific to a branch of Wicca that I had no knowledge of. And it was really, it was based on Irish mythology, and not only is like most of my genetic background from Ireland and Scotland and England, which is where, you know, these deities would have been the most found. But I was obsessed with it because of Gone with the Wind, of all things. the sequel to Gone with the Wind, even the first sequel was called Scarlet, and that is the book that got me obsessed with Ireland, because more than half of the book takes place there. So, and I think I read that 3 or 4 times just when I was 12, like, let alone as I was growing up after that, you know, as a teenager and as a mom. And, you know, I didn't read anything else. Sometimes it was the only thing I would read. So it kind of fed that obsession. And when I found that deck, even before she let me open it, I was like enthralled with it. Like I knew that that deck was for me. I knew it, and I needed to make sure that nobody else got it before I did. So I bought it right then and there. Like, I didn't actually have a whole lot of money. I mean, I was a very young single mom. I had 3 kids. I was struggling to find work, you know, I was just getting, you know, just separated, getting a divorce, whatever. But I couldn't pass it up. Like, I absolutely could not pass it up. I had to get that deck, and I did. And it's absolutely beautiful. Like, I still have a copy of it down, you know, in the main part of the den. At one point, I did lose my copy, the one that I bought for my friend, and then another one of my friends, about 4 years later, was helping me to locate another copy. It turns out it was out of print, so it was really hard to find at a decent price. I did find a place on Amazon as like a second seller or whatever, independent seller. I don't even know what they call them. So I took the deck home and I read through the entire book and what have you. And I know I'm off topic again because I was already up to like replacing it, but I'll finish that story in a second. But I played with that deck constantly. Like, it was always in my hands. I was always shuffling it. I knew every picture. I knew the Gaelic on the cards. There were places where there was Ogham script, and I took the time to translate that so that I knew what each card said in, you know, its entirety. I worked really hard to get to know that deck. So of course, when I did manage to misplace it, it was very, very sad. Like, I was very upset. So when we found the copy on Amazon, I was like super happy because I felt like I was missing something. Like, have you ever been that attached to a tarot deck or a tool of any kind where it's like, if you don't have it, you just don't feel right? That's the way I was with that deck. I'm like that with jewelry too. These two specifically. So that's my pendant for head hurt, for Sekhmet head hurt, and this is my pity charm for my pupper. And those are the two that I never, ever, ever take off. In fact, this one's just knotted, so it's not going to come off. It was like, well, like that, you know, like it felt like I was naked without this deck, I guess, in a way of speaking. So I was all excited because I had found another copy, and I was like checking the tracking every day, multiple times a day, waiting for this thing to show up. It finally did, and I went to the post office to pick it up, and I was really excited, like really, really excited. I opened it up, and it was the wrong deck. I ended up with something, butterfly affirmations or something. Like, this has nothing to do with Irish mythology, thank you. So I was pretty upset. I contacted the seller, and he's like, "Oh, I must have sent yours to the other person." Well, I don't have any more of them. What? So, you know, I was pretty pissed. I really was. So my best friend, who I was actually speaking to at the time that I picked up the package that had the wrong deck, so she grabbed the name of the deck from me so that she could write it down with the right spelling and all that. And she went looking. And she did find a copy of it that was not $400, which was all I was finding. Except for that one on Amazon, which was like $60. So she bought it and had it sent to me, and so I do have a copy of it again, and it is still to this day one of my favorite decks. I don't use it as often as I used to because I do collect a lot of decks, and that means that for me at least, I do tend to use the new deck as much as I can, and then I'll eventually go back to one of the original ones. I like the Robin Wood. Or, believe it or not, the Rider-Waite. So, I absolutely detested the Rider-Waite. I absolutely detested it. But I did have a copy. You know, I had my original copy for a long time. And then I moved and it got destroyed in one of the boxes. So I did buy another copy. But it wasn't the same as the one that I had. It was a different version. I got the Universal Weight, and I had the Radiant Rider-Waite. I didn't mind the Radiant. Like, I had no issues working with that one for some reason. And then I found the Centennial Smith-Waite Centennial. And that deck, like, I don't know what it was. Like, it's the original coloring, which was helpful because, like, I don't like that garish, bright-ass yellow that they have on the original, or on the other cards. Like, I really don't like it. It just stands out to me, but not in a good way. And it confuses my brain because, like, why is the sky yellow? You know, like, are they dealing with some fog? Is there, like, some kind of toxin floating in the air? Excuse me, my brain just didn't like it. But then I got this Centennial, and I had, shortly after that, without knowing, I bought a copy, finally, of Holistic Tarot by Benabel Wen. Sorry, her name always confuses me. I know it. I do. It's just, like, trying to say that, my mouth doesn't, like it that much. So anyways, I got that book, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to start reading this. And I was actually using a different deck to go through it. Similar, but different. It was the Goddess Tarot by Chris Walder. So all of the cards were Rider-Waite themed, but they all had female, we'll say, characters in them. Except for the king of whatever suit. And he was lower than the queen. And, like, it was fine, but it did confuse me a little bit. Because, like, why, like, they keep their meaning, but they switch spots, and I don't know, it was just, like, something I couldn't comprehend very well. But I thought maybe if I, you know, went through that book with that deck, I would be okay. And in a way, it did work, like, in a way, but I was, like, I'm reading the description that she provides of each of the cards and all that, and it just didn't fit with the images that I was seeing, and my brain was confused. Hi, sweetheart. My granddaughter came outside again. Come here. Come here, look. Say hello. Hi. Bye-bye. So, she's waving at the dog. Bye-bye, Dax. So, when I started having difficulty with reading the book and the Goddess Tarot together, it was really, really confusing. But I did have the Centennial. So I grabbed that and I started the card part over again. And hi. Oh, night. So I grabbed that Centennial, and I'm going through each of the cards, the same as I was doing with the Goddess Tarot, but specific, because those descriptions and everything are specific to the Rider-Waite series. So as I'm going through them, I got through all the cards and into some of the other stuff that she's got going on after. And I'm, getting to a point where it's like, okay, let's read with these now. Let's do this 3-card spread. Let's, do the thing. And I could not believe how much easier it was for me to read those cards. It helped immensely in getting me reading with the Rider-Waite, and you know, to this day, and we're going back, you know, for almost five years, it's been my favorite deck. I really, really, really enjoy working with that deck. So yeah, needless to say, I do actually like the Centennial Smith-Waite. It's definitely hands down my favorite deck at this point, and I do all of my professional readings with that deck, amazingly. It never ceases to amaze me how different it can be reading with a deck that you might be familiar with, but there's subtle changes. Like in the Centennial, the only thing that's different is the coloring. With the Faery Wicca, it uses pips, which I'd never used before. But there's also images that go with the pips that help you. And I'd never encountered that before either, where there were, well, only one other time, but it was like after this. But like, it's not normal to find a deck that has pip cards that has scenery as part of it. It's usually just the image of whatever the symbol happens to be. The other deck that I have that has the scenery in the background that kind of helps you out a little bit in that regard is the Pagan Otherworlds Tarot. And again, that's a deck that I love. The feeling of those cards, if you don't, like, if you've never had these cards have the best texture I have ever encountered. Like, they feel and behave like playing cards, but good quality playing cards, not the paper crap that's going to fall apart on you right away, but like good quality cards. I love playing with those cards, even if all I'm doing is shuffling them, because they're just amazing. They feel amazing. They have a great like energy to them. So I think that the energy in a deck. We're gonna take a break here, and I'll do a different video in regards to the energy in a tarot deck. So in the meantime, I hope you all have enjoyed my confusing little story. Sorry. If you have any questions or anything for me, you are more than welcome to leave them in the comment box below. I will try to put up a link to the Faery Wicca and the Centennial Rider-Waite and the Goddess Tarot as well. So do keep an eye out for those. If you have anything in particular that you'd like me to cover in regards to Reiki or tarot, or combining shamanism with Reiki, which I now do on a regular basis, I would be absolutely happy to answer those questions. So don't be afraid to ask. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful evening. It is evening here in sunny Manitoba. So I hope you all have a great evening, and take care. Bye.